Alrighty, y'all, so let's get into what the Odyssey is all about. Again, the film is directed by Christopher Nolan and stars an ensemble cast led by Matt Damon, who plays Odysseus, Tom Holland, who plays Telemachus, Anne Hathaway as Penelope, and Lupita Nyong'o as Helen of Troy. And it is based on the ancient Greek epic poem written by Homer in 8th century BC. So if you had to read that in AP literature, like me, then you're in good shape. But if not, I'll tell you a little bit about it. After the Trojan War, Odysseus faces a dangerous voyage back to Ithaca, meeting creatures like the Cyclops, Polyphemus, Sirens, and Calypso along the way. So I'm excited for this. I'm gonna probably have to go right now to the theater. However, it is 90-something degrees out here in South Florida, so this might need to come off, but I'm gonna change into something else. So guys, on the other side, I'll
keep up. Nolan, he's one of my all-time favorite directors, so like many people, I was endlessly excited for this. And this movie delivered on so many things that you would expect it to deliver on. It didn't quite hit the mark in some areas that I hoped it would, yet it still managed to surprise me in more ways than one. But before going into all that, want to bring it back to D-Box because they're of course sponsoring this.
D-Box motion seats are synced with the movie, so when something moves, crashes, or hits on screen, you actually feel it in the theater, and you can control the intensity right from your seat, whether you want it more subtle or you want to go all in. It is another level of immersion without distracting from the movie itself. So if you're planning on booking tickets, use the link in the description now to find a participating Cinemark and book your movie with D-Box seats
today. Anyway, in traditional Nolan style, the movie deals heavily with time. It's told in a non-linear fashion, but the use of time in this movie, it's so intentional. It feels almost like...
But what I find so weird about this instance is that everyone seems to love this movie. It has universal acclaim, which is just wild to me because it feels obviously bad, and I'm just so So I've been spending all day trying to figure out how to put together a angle or a point of view or an approach on how to tackle talking about the movie, but I finally decided I just want to talk about everything, so I'm just gonna go down the plot and we're gonna fucking get into it together. So the movie opens with Elliot Page. We're out
even alive or dead, and Odysseus is spending all this time desperately trying to return to a version of home that may not even exist anymore. In the first act of this movie, which for some reason I expected this, I had that experience I've had with some other Nolan movies where like the first 20 or 30 minutes made me question whether or not I was actually gonna like it because they're just throwing a lot at you. And I'm putting a lot of emphasis on the first watch here because you've got that style of quick cuts, memory, fantasy inserts, jumping around through different points of time, the pacing, all these relationships and having to super focus on the information instead of being able to emotionally connect. And that was very much something I had to overcome in the first 20 or 30 minutes. And to be clear, it wasn't like I was confused. I understood what was happening. It was more that the movie was moving through information, memories, timelines, and relationships so quickly that I was processing it intellectually before I was emotionally connecting with it. However, the movie is beautiful from the first frame to the very last, but that first 20 to 30 minutes throws so much at you because it's setting up a lot. But the main
The Trojan horse. How did it get so buried in the sand? You know, and then I was shocked that they had to get all those slaves to drag it inside. If I had been Troy and I saw that thing sticking out of the middle of the sand, I'd be like, I say we keep it here. I don't know what this is. I thought it was only okay. It was just made of wood. I couldn't understand why they would haul it out of the sand and drag it all the way into the building. I think it's because they felt it was an offering in the name of Zeus and the gods, and so to not take it would be to anger the gods. But, you know, in the past, it's been depicted right at the front door on wheels. And so, yeah, then I can see them deciding to pull it inside. But here, I was like, man, just leave it there. It looks nice on the beach. It'll be nice. People can come look at it. So I would have saved Troy. On
the beach, we've got the Trojan horse. We're seeing how the Trojans accepted the horse. Right off the bat, I fucking hate everyone's costumes in this movie. And it's not an accuracy thing. Lord of the Rings is awesome, and that stuff's not super accurate, although it's whatever. I'm not getting into it. But it looks good. That's the important part. I don't care if you're gonna make something different, but what they came up with looks 3D printed. It looks like it's made out of plastic. It also just looks stupid. I just think the shapes and the designs are not cool looking, it's just silly looking. Obviously that's a personal preference thing, but I want to give you these things as they hit me. Okay, fine, we established that's how they get the horse. The next part of the movie is what feels like 45 fucking minutes of uninterrupted exposition. It is Tom Holland talking to John Leguizamo for 10 minutes on a roof about, hey, just so that the viewer and the listener knows, here's a bit of data that's important for the backstory. Then it's Tom talking to his...
A big part of his journey is trying to find out what happened to Odysseus and also trying to become his own man instead of living underneath this mythological image of his father. And then the movie moves backwards and forwards through time. We see parts of the Siege of Troy. We see the Trojan horse deception. We follow Odysseus and his crew during their 10-year attempt to return home, completely exhausted and spiritually worn down survivors. We're experiencing the man, the myth that grows around him and the family, living with consequences of his absence. And like many Nolan films, I do think a lot of these elements will become likely will become stronger on a rewatch, especially that first act. Once I'm no longer, using the opening to determine who everybody is, where we are in the timeline, and how those relationships connect, I'll probably be able to focus more on all the emotional information that's being planted there. And honestly, I think even some of the performances might play better for me on a second time, where this movie consistently succeeds.
Are you like, does Zeus's law apply to war? I don't know. I think maybe it gets put on hold for war. We'll talk about the Trojan sequence as well in best sequences. But that wasn't the only violation of the gods, and I think that Christopher Nolan's trying to point out that when that happens, that's when society starts to fall apart. Now, that's bold words about the importance of religion, particularly in the United States, where we're supposed to have separation of church and state. But, religion has long played an important part, sometimes in a negative way, used to control people. That's not great. But
are you this arrogant conqueror who came up with the plan for the Trojan horse and then is like boastful about how, yes, I conquered those guys, screw those guys? Or are you this torn war vet who's like, oh my God, the horrors of war. I can't believe what I've done. I've broken this contract between Zeus and now the world's going to end. But I'm so ashamed of look at these people pillaging and, hurting these people, and how they, show Athena being desecrated as like one of the, women being, beheaded, and he's horrified by what he's seeing. But again, that structure is so strange because the rest of the movie, we're watching him be like, okay, great, I'm going to send these guys, we need more food. We'll make some stops and we'll burn their fucking roofs off and give us some food. And that happens after Troy. The movie has so many unearned hype points at the end of it, where it's like, yeah, he's back. This is going to be sick. Let's pay it off with the least interesting fight choreography and camera work you've ever seen. But it's also got, wife, when I was gone, I did the Trojan thing and I felt so bad. And the whole energy is like, I'm a changed man. I've seen some shit. I feel different about things than I did yesterday. I'm different. But that all happened before he does the voyage, where on the voyage, he's being immature the whole time. It's like, we followed Agamemnon enough. So for my own personal pride, we're going to take the south route. Well, that goes really fucking bad. The first people we go and pillage and plunder tell us, hey, don't keep going that way. It's bad. And he's like, God, get fucked. I'm going to go anyway. Then they deal with the giant, or the Cyclops, they do okay, but then on their way out, he's like, yeah, fuck you, and he shoots him one more time, kind of getting his attention, and then more guys get killed because of him. Now, again, this is the guy who already has had...
It's because Odysseus witnessed either a woman of Troy or a priestess of Athena in Troy beheaded right in front of him. And he was so haunted by that. They sure seem to be killing mostly women, which was crazy. We're going to talk about Christopher Nolan and how he views and treats women in his films. But, and that's why but the movie's told out of order. So for some reason, I felt that Athena had looked like Zendaya to him before he'd gone off to Troy. But that apparently was why she looked like that. And so he really actually wasn't seeing a god. No, there are no gods in this movie, which is a very interesting choice. It's a little bit disappointing to Greek mythology fans, but for the purposes of
or artificial, he isn't embarrassed by the giants, the gods, or the supernatural elements. He lets them be mythological, but because of the practicality and the physical locations and the way everything is photographed, it still feels believable and grounded even while you're watching these obviously fantastical moments. It feels like these characters genuinely live in a world where gods and monsters are a natural part of reality. I love how they're just letting me walk this theater. It doesn't feel like a bunch of normal historical characters suddenly wandered into a fantasy movie. I love a good religious horror movie. And generally, those are movies that are dealing with Christian mythology, you know, demons, possession, the devil, crisis of faith. I just watched St. Maud recently. Anyway, the movie embraces the psychological.
Again. So we cut back to the giant. Of course, more guys die. They figure out their little plan on how to get out. They stab him in the eye. You guys know the story. But this sets up one of those points I was talking about. So for instance, Troy picked a side. It said, we are going to be a believable, quote unquote, realistic telling of the story. Essentially meaning the adaptation itself is going to try to treat it like, what if there were no gods? What if this all just was mythology? If this did take place and you stripped away all the magic, what are you left with? And let's try to tell that story. Obviously, it's not realistic, but that's what they're doing. In this movie, we very clearly have chosen, yeah, we're going to go, you know, fantasy. That's fine. Like, great, let's do that. But then I find it so strange in where it pivots from the original story in ways that makes me feel like they don't want to go fantasy, but they've already committed to fantasy. So for instance, the Cyclops in the original story is the son of Poseidon. We kept that. And then rats on them. And, you know, in the movie, all he does is cry out, but you can kind of get the idea that, okay, he's like crying out to Poseidon and then Poseidon's going to get him. But then the movie does this weird thing where it's like, yeah, sure, we've got a Cyclops and he's a giant, no big deal. But Poseidon, like, no, we're not going to show that. And the whole idea that he takes the winds that would let them go home. Yeah, we're not going to show that either.
Winds! Very stubborn.
So you're like, okay, he killed the Cyclops, and then the Cyclops was pissed, and then they bounce, and then there's nothing that tells you why they're just lost. Well, you're lost because you took a weird route. You went south instead of west, and now you're just kind of lost because you're going through weird territory. This is why, this explains the rest of the story, why he can't go home, is because Poseidon is like, fuck you, and I'm literally taking the winds that would get you home. Why cut that? That would take no time to explain.
Away. There's the Cyclops sequence that's obviously been teased quite a bit, and so much of the time I'm sitting there thinking, like, how the fuck did they actually do this practically? There's a sequence with...
So I'm surprised they weren't more alarmed about that, but maybe they were just that hungry. But the great thing that they started out was when Odysseus, the men are like, maybe you should sit this one out, Odysseus, because you keep getting a lot of us killed. And he's like, fine, I'll hunt for some dinner for us tonight in case there's nothing up there. So he finds a deer. And I did like that Odysseus would always twing his bow as like he felt it was an honorable way to hunt, right? Where he was like, at least let the, you know, although he didn't do that for Sinon. He didn't let Sinon know he was being sacrificed. That's an interesting disparity. Oh, I didn't think of that until just now. But yeah, he was like, at least let the animal know that it's being hunted. So it has a chance, you know, and give it.
Did they actually do this practically? There's a sequence with Cersei that is probably my favorite in the whole movie. And yeah, the whole finale was just incredible. It was such an incredible finale. And what Nolan found...
Like, we could spend a little less time in Ithaca.
Poseidon still believes he can stop it. Poseidon this, Poseidon that. Poseidon's a bully.
What happens is the rest of the movie feels like this just a series of unfortunate events that don't feel like they're being born from anything specific. I forget where, but at some point in the movie, Matt Damon explains what it was like being in the Trojan horse. And I think there's a very gritty, like realistic, it just feels very grounded. It feels very like Dunkirk, where it's like, yeah, we were stuck inside of this, you know, cramped place and it was hot. And in real life, yeah, the water would rise up and these guys would drown and we were trying to make them survive and it was difficult. You know, who even knew if the plan was going to work? It almost didn't. You know, they were stabbing the thing to see if anyone was inside. All of that screams kind of that Troy energy to me of the, you know, what if it really did go like this? How could it work? What would happen? What kind of issues would you have? On the flip side, the actual design of the horse is artisanal. I'm supposed to believe that they built that out of ships. So again, I don't think either side of that coin is wrong. It just felt so thematically weird to me that they were being split like this. It's this thing of, yeah, let's treat it super serious.
Siren sequence. What a letdown. I mean, have you seen a little movie, Sinbad, from DreamWorks Animation? The siren sequence there is incredible. So, I mean, I've seen a lot of sirens over the years. And so these are just some ladies on rocks and you don't even hear their song. You know, Odysseus explains it. He was like, it was really good. You know, basically he's just like, yeah, it was hard to resist. And you're like, oh, tell me something I don't know. We knew we had to tie you to the mast. But yeah, there are just some ladies.
Out on the ocean, you feel the movement of the ships underneath you. When the battles and mythological elements hit, you feel those impacts. This movie really does embrace the gods. It embraces the mythology. It's like an action adventure horror fantasy dealing with aging, responsibility, history, pain, imperfect shared past, existentialism, the inevitability of death, existentialism, justice versus vengeance, love and what home actually means. And this movie is at its most engrossing whenever it focuses on Matt Damon's Odysseus and his perilous journey. That's where it's at its absolute best, because there are plenty of scenes without him. A lot of scenes with Tom Holland, Anne Hathaway, Robert Pattinson, and John Leguizamo. They stay very focused on the real-world political and familial aspects of what's happening in in Ithaca, and a lot of the material is constantly intriguing.
For men, right? Well, he should know. I mean, we know what we do, and I hope that you know what you do. And men might bury their feelings down deep, but that doesn't mean they don't wrestle with them. And one thing, I'm sure some of you have witnessed this yourself, or you've recognized yourself doing it, but very often men will go off to deal with stuff on their own, leaving largely, usually the women in their lives in a holding pattern, right? So women are like, well, I just have to wait here while you figure this out. And guys are like, yeah, how long is it going to take? I don't know. And you expect me to wait? And they're like, yeah, I do. And it's like, well, why don't we take this journey together? And they're like, no. I mean, I guess men don't want to be seen as weak to the women in their lives. I guess maybe that's part of the reasoning. But wouldn't it have been great if he'd come home and worked through all this
Day story takes place years after the Trojan War. Odysseus, he's gone from Ithaca for 20 years, and back in Ithaca, his wife Penelope and his son Telemachus are trying to hold everything together while all these suitors have essentially taken over their home, consumed their resources, and pressured Penelope to choose another husband, which would also mean choosing another king. And Telemachus, I think I'm saying his name right, he's grown up hearing about how incredible and legendary his father is, but he doesn't really know the man. So a big part of his journey is trying to find out what happened to Odysseus and also trying to become his own man instead of living underneath this mythological image.
Or waiting for Odysseus to come back, or asking people if they've heard anything about Odysseus. That's all that fucking happens at Ithaca. So these are the two places we're bouncing back and forth from. What I would have preferred is a structure that's much more like Saving Private Ryan, where we open at Ithaca, we can establish what's going on, but then we spend the rest of the movie with Odysseus and his crew. What I would like to see is that when we go from action piece and lose a bunch of men, instead of hopping over to Ithaca where people can continue to ask people if they've seen Odysseus and wonder if he's coming back and hope he's coming back soon, we can instead use those down energy points to be those campfire scenes where we get to know the men and we learn more about them and they talk to each other and they share stories and we make promises to each other and we rewrite each other's letters to send to their dads. We learn about how you used to pretend to be asleep when your mom came home. And then later when we have another scene where some of these guys die, I can give a shit because I know these guys. I've just, you know what I'm saying. But instead, it's like, no, let's go back to Ithaca. And then Tom is like, I wonder if those bad guys outside the door are still really bad guys. I think they're going to do bad guy stuff. I wonder if my dad's coming home. I've been wondering this for 20 years, but I'm still wondering it. I guess I'll go talk to John Bernthal and ask
Matt Damon's performance. Robert Pattinson is and Antinous? And he's like the leading suitor and clearly the villain of the Ithaca storyline. He's a manipulative, conniving son of a bitch, and I loved his commitment to the role. He brings so much entitlement and menace to the character where you can feel how comfortable this guy has become occupying someone else's home and acting like everything already belongs to him. Anne Hathaway surprised me. She plays Penelope, like really surprised as shit. I don't know why I say that. Like every Anne Hathaway movie, every time she's in a movie, I'm always surprised by how much I love her work. And I need to stop being surprised because she's always great. And
that world is gone.
Odysseus in disguise says to his son, I'd like to talk to you in private. And his son's bodyguard is like, these are all priests. They're not going to tell anybody. And I'm like, buddy, I'm glad you're so faithful. You've never met a corrupt priest. I still think we should talk in private, even if they really were priests and not the suitors' assassins. Telemachus was pretty slow, both with sword and with his wits, but he was a nice guy, Tom Holland's character, because he saw the blood on the sleeve of the priest and he was like, I'm a little suspicious, but maybe let's see. But yeah, but also
I don't know how to pronounce his character's name. He's Odysseus' faithful servant who remained in Ithaca during his absence, and he became something of like a surrogate father to Tom Holland's Telemachus. Now, when he first showed up in the makeup, I didn't find it particularly believable. I was hyper aware that it was John Leguizamo. It kind of added to my first act concern. But as the movie progressed, I really connected with what he was doing. He brings, hey, look, it's freaking Tom Holland. He brings a lot of warmth.
Odysseus versus the suitors. You know, he comes home, he sees John Leguizamo. That was very nice. He didn't trust John Leguizamo at first either, to be fair. Then he goes and he sees his son a little bit, and he helps him out with the priests in disguise. That was all very good. But I loved when he went home, and he went home again disguised as a beggar. I loved when he was sitting in the back with his face totally engulfed in shadow, looking almost like he might be a god in there, right? That was very cool. So him taking on the suitors was fantastic, right? So Penelope sets up a challenge to who she's going to marry. And that's who can thread the bow of Odysseus and hit the target like he always does. And of course, no one has ever been able to do that. And still no one can. And I like that Robert Pattinson stepped forward and said, we get the point, Penelope. No one can replace Odysseus, but someone has to because the dude is dead. That was great. Great sequence, great line, great delivery. But of course, Odysseus was there. And the beggar says, I would like to try. And, you know, I think Penelope wasn't sure. You know, Odysseus says, your mother will make sure I have a weapon by literally handing him his own bow, which only he can use. But at that point, she's not sure that it's him. She has a suspicion that it's him, which is why she put this challenge together. But you can see the anticipation as she waits to see.
A lot of time I was extremely aware that I was watching that famous person or actor. So let me start with the performers who I absolutely adored. Matt Damon as Odysseus. He's the goddamn lead character who was put through this 20-year journey, and we get to see him in so many different aspects of his life. As the leader of Ithaca, as a husband and father, a leader on the battlefield, the survivor, and a man being like just straight up humbled by the world, and he embodies it. Like, Matt Damon's a goddamn superstar, and I really believed him as this guy. Odysseus has to feel iconic and mythological while also being incredibly human and flawed. And I love that the movie doesn't make all his decisions automatically heroic. The same qualities that make him brilliant, his intelligence, his pride, his determination, his need to control every situation, are also qualities that contribute to his suffering. There's so much happening with the depiction of his character as man versus myth. I loved every aspect of the harshness of his journey. And this movie feels so much deeply about like PTSD, struggle, and weariness, and every part of that comes through.
But when he turns it around and does it from the other side, he's able to do it. But she's already turned her back at that point, and she's given hope back when she realizes that it is Odysseus. So that was incredible. And then he takes on all these suitors who they've taken the weapons away from, so that evens the playing field. And he's a ferocious fighter. And, you know, he's a crazed man. He's fighting for his family. He's fighting for his salvation. And I think to a degree he knows he's fighting so his son can have a future, and he probably will not, which is another reason I think maybe he and Penelope do kind of die at the end of the movie. But I really thought it was cool. Bend the knee. We all know that from Game of Thrones. I thought it was great when some suitors started to be like, you know what? I wasn't going to win anyway. I wasn't going to get to marry Penelope. I'm not dying over this. So they start to kneel one by one and bow out of the fight or bend out of the fight. And I thought that was great. But some people are not giving up. And I loved that. It's Logan Marshall Green, by
A wife?
Sink your teeth into. And it was a fascinating experience because during the first half of the movie, I felt like I was gathering the information. I wasn't as emotionally invested in the characters as I hoped to be. But by the end of the movie, I was so like on the edge of my fucking seat. And I was like, oh shit, I really am way more invested in this than I realized. A lot of the payoff of those earlier character moments, they show up in the latter half.
But I just was absolutely moved to tears in that final shot of Odysseus and Penelope sailing off together in the end, off towards, they said the sunset, or was it the sunrise? But, you know, Odysseus keeps being told, sail west to honor the dead. But I don't know about you, but a large part of me felt that, I'm sorry, that Odysseus and Penelope did die in the end. And they left their son to rule Ithaca. That crown looked ridiculous, by the way. Also, it was such a giant chunk of gold around Tom Holland's head. I was like, someone's going to snatch that off your head, man. You're wearing a treasure chest on your head. Particularly because I didn't see a lot of gold in the town, you know, or the city. So anyway, I felt like his parents finally were united, and then you get what I'm saying. It was very moving. And I just thought that was really beautiful. And also, he never got to know his son. And that was, of course, very tragic for him as well. Especially if you interpret it as at the end of the movie, he died, right? I mean, he got a lot of arrows stuck in him. He had that little bandage around his neck. I'm like, I don't think Greek medicine is this well progressed that you're going to be able to survive these wounds, buddy.
Even alive or dead, and Odysseus is spending all this time desperately trying to return to a version of home that may not even exist anymore. In the first act of this,
to kind of, you know, take apart. But this movie is very straightforward, and most of us are going, well, I don't know about most, but a lot of people are going into it already knowing the baseline, which is perfect, because this leads me into one of my main kind of issues with this movie. A big restructure I probably would have suggested had I been in the room. Not that anyone gives a fuck. But I think that this movie could have benefited greatly if it had borrowed from Saving Private Ryan, or any kind of war movie, generally speaking. The issue I had is that we're with Odysseus, and he has some indeterminate amount of men. We never get like a head count, which, not that you need one, but you never get he's got maybe 100 men, something like that. I don't know. I don't know any of them pretty much the whole fucking time. Like, I know their faces for a handful of the guys who had some dialogue. Obviously the names are difficult because they're ancient Greek, but it's not just that. If their names were Tom and Jerry, I would have struggled, because they have no characterization. Everyone's just kind of the same fucking guy, like including Odysseus. I don't think that Matt Damon had any presence. Him and Athena together, two people who I just don't think brought any presence, any gravitas to their roles. It felt just like two peasants, two normal people, two soldiers, whatever, you know, but not just them, kind of mostly everyone. He's got these men
ground by the end of it. And one more thing I forgot to mention, you guys, I'm very confident in saying that The Odyssey is better than Oppenheimer. But man, I loved it. I can't wait to talk about it some more. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. I love y'all. God bless you, and I'll catch you at the next screening. I'm seriously so terrified. I'm gonna go home and cry.